Hey, everybody, this is Tom Salemi. Welcome back to the Device Talks Weekly Podcast. We have a super cool episode for you today. We're going to be focusing on robotic surgery and digital surgery. We're talking with two of the leaders in this space. First, I will speak with Robert Kraal. Robert is the Vice President and General Manager of Connected Health at Zimmer Biomet. We'll, of course, go over his path into medtech. We're going to talk about a lot of the work that Zimmer Biomet is doing in connected health, including things like its smart implants, which we'll talk about at Device Talks West coming up in just a couple of weeks, October 19th and 20th in Santa Clara. We'll have Zimmer Biomet's Leanne Teplitsky there, along with Bill Hunter, the founder of Canary Medical, the creator of the sensor that's used in the implant. Anyway, I spoke with Robert about Zimmer's work in connected health, about how it's putting things together, and about a new arrangement it has with the Hospital for Special Surgery. After that, we'll have an interview that I did with Adam Sachs, which was super fun. We actually did the interview a few weeks ago on our DeviceTalks Tuesday platform. So maybe some of you have already heard it. Maybe some of you were sitting in on it. But Adam and I connected about a lot of different topics. We got to talk about Vicarious's approach. We took questions from the audience throughout, which was cool. So I got to ask some specific design questions that I wasn't sure how it would actually work when I heard it as a podcast, whether it would sound distracting. But it didn't. It was really neat to have people sort of chime in with their questions as I was interviewing Adam. So we'll definitely be doing that again because that was a lot of fun. And we'll similarly talk about an arrangement that Vicarious has with two healthcare groups. So lots to talk about in the surgery robotic space, or rather the surgical robotic space. But we did talk a lot of tech, but we talked a lot about sort of where the model is going. So great couple of interviews coming your way. And of course, we'll have Chris Newmarker with Newmarker's Newsmakers as well. I referenced a little bit earlier that we have Device Talks West happening in just a few weeks. So please do plan on attending. It'll be happening October 19th and 20th at the Santa Clara Convention Center. If you'd like to attend and want to save yourself some money, use the code DTWeekly25. That's DT Weekly 25, all caps, and you'll save yourself 25% off the cost. So before we begin this episode, I would like to bring in a message from our sponsor, Sertronics. I'm speaking with Tom Farron. Tom is Chief Revenue Officer at Sertronics. Tom, tell us about Sertronics.
Sertronics is a contract manufacturer of complex electromechanical assemblies. So we're an integrator. We build from the ground up PCBs, subassemblies, full integrated systems for the medical industry, medical device industry. We're about 43 years old, 200 strong. And we've been working in the medical device industry now for 25 plus years in very diverse markets with household names that you'd probably know for systems that will have been used in hospitals, facilities, dermatology, et cetera. So we span a lot of markets. We build things that have lasers and optics in them. The more complex, the more regulated, the better we are. So we are an FDA and 13485 company. So the one thing I think that's important is we're a company that ramps. So if you're an OEM and you've got your prototypes done, you've got your documentation all ready, then we are the ones who will help you ramp.
All right, we'll hear more from Tom Farron a little later in the podcast. If you'd like to find out more information about Sertronics right now, go to its website, Sertronics.com. That's CIRTRONICS.com. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Chris Newmarker, how are you, sir?
Doing well, Tom. Doing well.
I understand you've got 2 great fall days there in Minnesota.
Yes, I think we're in the middle of our 2-week autumn season between heat and cold.
I'll be there in early November. Do you think you can hold on to those fine temps until I get there?
Lucky if there. I think it was like 2 years ago we had a snowstorm before Halloween. So we'll see, man.
Fantastic.
Could be nice, could be snowy. We'll see.
Fantastic. I bought me a new winter coatee. Maybe I'll bring that along just in case.
Builds character, Tom. It builds character.
Yeah, that's what I hear. You are a character. I mean, you have character. You certainly have character.
That's true. Yeah, hopefully I'm not a character, but yeah.
No, I tried to slip that a character. But you're so darn nice. I couldn't be snarky. Good golly.
Thanks, man. I heard we have an event coming up in just 2 weeks. Time flies by.
That's a great lead. And yeah, it's a little over 2 weeks. It's October 19th and 20th. We'll have Device Talks West. I know you and I just had a conversation with Celine Martin of Johnson & Johnson. She'll be one of our keynotes, along with Gary Guthart of Intuitive. We have lots of other great ones, including Brett Wall of Medtronic and Gio Nadapoli of Medtronic.
Leslie Trigg about
Medical. Deb Kilpatrick of Evidation. So lots going on. Folks, as
the
I
lineup
mentioned,
is amazing.
It is. It's stellar. And we would just love to see everyone who's listening to this podcast at Device Talks West. So as I mentioned at the top, go to west.devicetalks.com or devicetalks.com and make sure you register. We'd love to see you there.
Hey, if you're one of our connections, or you want to be in the inside crowd on Device Talks, like ping me or Tom, because we could hook you up. We got a few discount codes.
Yes, we do. We are totally plugged in.
We take care of our friends.
That's right.
Take care of our friends.
That's right. I did drop a code in the message, but we might have a secret code if folks want to reach out directly to us on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But no, things are moving along. Excited to be in the same room with everybody. Excited to get the med tech leaders together for a fun conversation. So 2 days of fun conversations, plural. It won't be one continuous conversation because that would be exhausting to talk for 2 straight days.
Yes.
Yeah. So it'd be a lot like some of our intros.
I'd lose my voice. I'd be like,
it seemed to go on forever.
Be ending in like, hi, Tom. Well, I guess we got Device Talks West done.
Yes, folks should be joining us there. But right now, we're here to roll out this week's
the Newmarkers Newsmakers.
There they are. We get some big names this week.
Yes.
And seems like a lot of orthopedic and orthopedic-related industries or news, at least the first two. So
yeah, exactly.
Let's start with, is spine ortho? I always think it is, but I mean,
I think it's a subgroup in ortho.
Yeah.
That's the way I treat spine. It's kind of a subgroup. I mean, they're bones, right?
It's definitely ortho adjacent. It is and it's not, I guess. I mean, you're dealing with vertebra, but also with the nervous system. So muscle. Yeah. So, all right, it's ortho adjacent. It's ortho adjacent. So what is number 5?
It's kind of a nice corrective, I'd say, because we had all this coverage just like a week ago from TCT. So Mass Device was feeling very cardio heavy. So it's nice, kind of refreshing that we got some ortho news this week. So, we got to cover all parts of this industry here and some ophthalmological. Gosh, I hope I pronounced that right. Ophthalmological. Stuff with eye care devices.
Stuff, yes.
Eye
ophthalmological.
We have big stuff, Tom.
We have all the O's: orthopedics, ophthalmology. Let's go into Newsmakers number 5.
Number 5, we got Stryker launching their Q guidance system for spine surgery. It got cleared earlier this year for use in adults as well as teenagers 13 and up, and it combines new optical tracking options. It's got a redesigned camera. It's got it also includes like some sophisticated algorithms from the newly launched spine guidance software. So the whole idea is more surgical planning and navigation, capability than, ever before. So, this has been a big trend, like just getting ever more sophisticated, surgical navigation systems, in this space. And, we're seeing a lot more, robots as well. Like Stryker's really big with it. It's Mako robots. And, it's, so just another nice development out of Stryker.
Yeah, we got some comments from Robbie Robinson, who took over fairly recently as president of Stryker's spine division. We'll have him on a Stryker Talks podcast in the very near future. And Stryker's certainly making some great moves in this space. And before anyone calls us on it, Chris, you said teenagers 13 and up. I think we could say that all teenagers are 13 and up. So we acknowledge that. You try doing a podcast. It's not easy to get every word right. Sometimes you trip over stuff.
I know as the news release language was children 13 and up. I probably most
you had
13 and
patients
up.
13 and up.
Most teens would not want to be called children. You know?
We don't want to insult any teenagers who are listening to the Device Talks Weekly podcast.
Exactly. Yeah.
Both
I hope
of
we have
them.
Teenagers. That'd be great.
I do too. If you are a teenager and you want to go to Device Talks West, ask your mom and dad and then ask us for a code.
There you go.
But please check with mom and dad.
Yes.
Number 4 on the Newmarker Newsmakers.
Wow. Number 4, we got Smith and Nephew announcing their first clinical use of their revision knee system with their
we don't do birthday parties at Device Talks. Sorry, go ahead.
Then we get like
we should probably take that one from the top. What's number 4 in the Newmarker Newsmakers?
Number 4 on the list, we got Smith and Nephew announcing the first cases for revision knee replacement using their Corey surgical handheld robotic system. So it's Duke University surgeon performed the first cases just in August, and it was a combo of SNN's handheld Corey system with the Legion revision knee system. So it's just even more uses for Smith and Nephew's robotic surgery system in the ortho space. Competition's heating up.
This was the one robotic surgical system I've actually used. I used it at a conference. I guess it was probably AAOS.
Got a little bit of knee cleaned up there.
When it was blue belts, before Smith and Nephew bought it, and you could use it, and it was cool. It's like a little handheld thing, and it kind of kept you within the field, and so good. It's good to see that getting more applications. Good to see it being used on revisions when they're necessary.
Smith and Nephew acquired it. They made it. They made everything a lot smaller and more sleek, and they've made a lot of improvements to it. So
very cool. Very cool. All right. Now it's time to hear my interview with Rob Kraal. Rob is Vice President and General Manager of Connected Health at Zimmer Biomet. But first, let's hear a message from our sponsor, Sertronics. Once again, I'm speaking with Tom Farron. Tom is Chief Revenue Officer at Sertronics. Tom, you gave us a great overview at the start. Could you tell me a little bit more about what stage of company does Sertronics work with? When does Sertronics add the most value?
That's a great question, because we're very specific in kind of where we jump in the product life cycle. We are distinctly not a prototype company. We are not one that is trying to launch brand new products. We jump in when the prototypes are done, the documentation has come together, and the orders are coming in. And now what? How do we ramp? How do we get more and more of these out into the marketplace? That's where Sertronics steps in. That's where we specialize. So when you start to grow, we can grow with you. We're not looking to do 100,000 of anything. Even 10,000 is a high number for complex integrated systems. So when it's low to medium volume and the ramp is coming and you need somebody to hold your hand and take you out into the marketplace, high touch, lots of customer service, processing ECOs as they come along, that's where we jump into the game and specialize.
All right, that's great. We'll hear more from Tom Farron a little later in the podcast. Once again, if you want to find out more about Sertronics, go to sertronics.com. Well, Rob Kraal, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Tom. Good to be with you.
I'm anxious to learn more about Zimmer Biomet's agreement with HSS, but it's always great to understand our guests' path to where they are today. Rob, how did you find your way into the medtech industry?
Well, Tom, it's a pretty long and windy road. I started out actually. My first 10 years of my career was spent as a clinician. I was an RN in the pediatric ICU, so that's where I started. My last clinical job, I managed the pediatric ICU and interventional cardiology departments at UCSF in San Francisco, and then found my way from there into med tech. And I have done a variety of different roles. I've sold device, I've led sales organizations, I've started a small med tech company, sold that company, and invested in a tech startup here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, that was later sold to Zimmer Biomet. And that's what brings me to Zimmer Biomet today.
Wow, that's amazing. So what was it that drew you to your initial career being an RN? I imagine patient care.
Yeah, it really was. It really was patient care. And I did, through my rotations, I found that pediatric ICU was something that really interested me. It's an area that one is intense with a great mission, right? That we dealt with kids that needed a lot of care. We focused largely on congenital heart disease surgery at UCSF. And it was a really, really rewarding path dealing with kids that largely did well. And 97% of the outcomes were really positive. It had a large effect on my life and my career going forward.
What convinced you to leave that path for more one on the business side of things?
Yeah, I often ask myself that question, Tom. I think I came to the realization that for my career to grow, I was going to probably move further and further away from the bedside.
Yeah.
And I found that through med device and med tech, I would have this ability to influence a large amount of patients through innovation.
It makes a lot of sense, and it's a familiar path. So let's talk about your role currently now at Zimmer Biomet. As we've talked about, your Vice President and General Manager of Connected Health. Zimmer Biomet's been making a lot of news recently regarding ZB Edge and its use of data and sensors and its deal with Canary Medical. So a lot of exciting things happening there. As Vice President and General Manager of Connected Health at Zimmer Biomet, what are your responsibilities?
The way I describe the role, Tom, is in Connected Health, we sit in a larger BU called Technology and Data Solutions, but Connected Health is really responsible for these digital development or development of digital tools that connect patients to surgeons through tools like My Mobility with Apple Watch and the deal that we signed with Apple, Ortho Intel, the collection of that data and the display of the data back to the surgeon, as well as the connection of the devices inside of our ecosystem that we call ZB Edge. So the connection of robotics in our ROSA platform, Persona IQ, connecting the data collected from the smart implant to healthcare data that's collected through My Mobility. So we have this really rich ability to collect data across a patient's entire continuum of care, and then to make sense of that data through insights. We have a data science team based out of the UK that reports into me as well. So we're responsible for the connection of those things and the insights that are generated as a result of that.
I'm sure there's multiple answers to this question, but where is the data going and who is using the data? Is it primarily, are the internal tools for your own analysis? Are they external or used clinically by the folks using your implants, a mix of both?
Yeah, largely for the purpose of insight generation for our clinicians. Obviously, data generated and displayed back to the patient is used by the patient. But then data collection and aggregation for the purposes of creating those clinical insights are for the clinical teams that we serve. So when we look at that data collection, looking at insight generation, we launched a product called Walk AI. So it's the first predictive product that looks at patient movement postoperatively and can view the patient's walking speed between postoperative day 15 and postoperative day 40 and give the surgeon some view into the future, can now start to predict that patient's walking speed at postoperative day 90. So this is absolutely new in our field to take real world data collected from patients and start to predict if they're on or off course sometime into the future. So it's a really, really good, it's been viewed very positively by the clinicians that are using it today.
Fantastic. So that success has obviously led to the agreement or the announcement regarding your 3-year agreement with to create HSS Zimmer Biomet Innovation Center for Artificial Intelligence and Robotic Joint Replacement. That's a lot, but it's an important project. So Zimmer Biomet's working with the Hospital for Special Surgery to create sort of what will the Center for Artificial Intelligence and Robotic Joint Replacement be responsible for?
Yeah, it's sort of a mouthful, isn't it? It's actually
I thought I could get it all out. I'm like, this is okay, but there's a lot to talk about. It's very descriptive. So go ahead.
Yeah, and we're really excited about it. It's our second deal that we've done with HSS. The first one, if you remember, was to create standardized care pathways that are HSS care pathways and author those care pathways into our platform, into My Mobility with Apple Watch. So we look at a center like HSS who has expertise in the orthopedic field, and to take what they're doing and doing really well, and that is educating their patients pre and post operatively, giving them the right exercise content, taking those HSS care pathways, and then putting them in our digital assets and making them available beyond HSS, so we can now deliver HSS care pathways to a broader audience. So that was our first deal that we did with them. This second deal around artificial intelligence and joint replacement is really seeking to discover discoveries with this ability to collect data across this care continuum. So our ability to collect data pre and post operatively with My Mobility with Apple Watch, this ability to collect data intraoperatively with robotics, and join with HSS and seek to uncover some of the stubborn problems in orthopedics. How exactly to balance a knee, how to place a component, kinematic versus anatomic alignment, trying to solve some of those through data and using that to build models around what exactly is the best final knee state for any given initial knee state. That's sort of the aspirational view of what we're trying to do together. We're working together on that with the HSS team, as well as the Zimmer Biomet Connected Health team, our clinical teams, as well as our data science teams in the UK.
So what does this agreement actually entail? Is it just a sharing of information? Talk a bit about the components of the agreement.
Yeah, the spirit of the agreement is to really uncover those problems that we'd like to solve with data collection and analysis. So meeting with HSS surgeons, with our steering committees to really uncover those stubborn problems that we think that we can solve with data, and then creating a hypothesis that we think that we can solve, taking that back, data collecting across this group of patients, again, pre, post, and intraoperatively, and then solving for that through data analysis, allowing our data science team to model the data in a way that could potentially create some insight.
So what are some of those problems? What's the number one or number two problem you're hoping to address?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we recognize in orthopedics, in knee surgery in particular, that it's an elective procedure with great outcomes, yet 20% of the patients report that they're dissatisfied with the outcome. And I'm not sure we completely understand why, whether that is component placement, ligament balancing, as we've said, and what exactly is the ideal final knee state for any given initial knee state. So looking at this ability to really measure things intraoperatively, and robotic surgery has really allowed for this. In the past, it was the surgeon really looking at a feel intraoperatively, and we're now able to measure things intraoperatively that we just weren't able to do in the past. Mm-hmm. And through that measurement and this ability to then measure functional outcomes, how quickly are those patients returning to function? Is that function impaired? And our launch of Persona IQ gives us this ability now, with data collection coming directly off of the implant, to connect Persona IQ data directly across that care continuum and start to uncover signals in that data that, again, may lead to insight. That's the sort of aspirational view of what we're trying to do together.
Well, we'll be talking about Persona IQ and Canary Medical at DeviceTalks West in October. Early on, what sort of sense are you getting from the data that you're receiving from Persona IQ from folks who have had the implant? Are you seeing data that perhaps you weren't aware of, that are unveiling things that you weren't aware of before in terms of how people are walking with it or their mobility? Anything early on that you've been able to pull from the sensors?
Yeah, I think what we're talking about publicly is there is data generation that's coming from the sensor that is giving us a real signal around understanding, gait dynamics in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
We can point very clearly to recovery curves, looking at persona IQ, and I think that's become very helpful to surgeons. We'll eventually launch recovery curves into the platform so surgeons at a glance can see if their patients are on or off track, which I think is very helpful, so that they can now identify those patients who potentially are problematic and either bring them back into the office earlier or just encourage them to do something differently earlier in their postoperative course before it becomes problematic.
And what is HSS's role in this agreement? Are they simply a place where where Zimmer Biomet systems and devices can be implanted, or are they going to take a role in data collection as well? What does the data collection part of this look like per this agreement?
Well, first of all, they're HSS. So they come with a really, really big name, and the fact that they are recognized as one of the global leaders in orthopedic is something to recognize for us. We're really proud to be associated with them in that sense. So I think having their clinical team also look at and give us perspective on some of those problems to solve is useful for us, so that we can give them some look at data collection. So where our data is present, what sort of data that we're collecting, and allow them to give us perspective on some of those problems that we'd like to solve, I think is incredibly valuable to us. And then this ability to data collect across a population that's representative of having a very standardized process. So they go through an HSS care pathway pre and post operatively. And again, this ability to then look at the data that's collected intraoperatively, at the decisions that the surgeon made intraoperatively, and then tie that to real functional outcomes is incredibly valuable.
Do you see this information being, or some of the feedback, at least from this agreement, the data coming from this agreement, does it help feed your R&D group? Does it go to your engineers, help them refine and advance your offerings? How will it be used in sort of product development?
I think it could potentially do that, but I think the way we view this, Tom, longer term, is this ability to create what we're calling robotic decision support tools. So now this could eventually find its way back into the product, where this model, this algorithm that's been developed around this large volume of data collection could eventually in itself become a product.
Interesting. I mean, that seems to be the really next generation, or it's already, I guess it's the current generation of robotic surgery, is the data that's collecting. And we've seen other companies really use these systems to not only perform the procedures, but also give surgeons previously untapped data sources where they know exactly how things should be positioned. Is that where you are and where you're headed with ZB Edge?
It is, Tom. And we have this ability. We've been doing this for some time now. So we have actually a very large library of data. We have a large repository of data that's already been collected. So it gives us, I think, a pretty nice head start in the space. We think it's a really exciting time to be in orthopedics. There will be discovery as a result of this, and I think patients will benefit as a result of it.
And is this an exclusive agreement in any way? Are you hoping to work with other healthcare institutions in a similar way, or where are you going to be focusing your attention for the foreseeable future?
I could see us doing more arrangements like this globally. I think to generate significant models that are representative of a global population and to avoid bias in your models, I think you have to do things like this in a global market. We are a global company, so we will have this ability to do like agreements with institutions like this around the world. That I think would be a next step for us.
And the final question, do you see this as sort of following a precedent that we might have seen in another therapeutic area where these sort of agreements have sort of helped validate and push forward some new technologies? Because we are seeing other surgical robotics companies sort of, it seems like hospitals are more interested in agreements like these. They're clearly saying some value in surgical robotic systems and the data that's collected.
Yeah, I think the analog for us is probably most tightly tied to cardiology, where algorithms like this have been developed for clinical care. I'm not sure if anything like this has been done in the industry, where you have a med tech company like Zimmer Biomet coming together with a large academic medical institution for the purposes of really tackling these big problems and creating insights. So again, I keep saying it, but we are really excited about it. I think the industry should be excited about it as well.
Fantastic. Well, we're eager to track your progress and to see what happens next. So, Rob Kraal, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks, Tom. Really appreciate it.
Well, let us roll on to number 3 on the Newmarker's Newsmakers.
Well, number 3 on the list is FDA clearing Medtronic's, next generation GI bleeding treatment system. The next powder endoscopic hemostasis system. So it uses a non-contact, non-thermal, and non-traumatic hemostatic powder, and it sprays through a catheter. Features a proprietary powder coating technology, and for minimize clogging. So they're describing this as like a really innovative system, for use in the GI space. Just this need to reduce the mortality that you can see from upper GI bleeding. And we not only did we cover this, but our associate Sean Hooley interviewed Dr. Austin Chang, who's the CMO of the gastrointestinal business at Medtronic, and got even more details about how the system works. So I'd encourage you to go to Mass Device, check out the story.
Yep. Austin Chang is new to Medtronic and is making quite an impact. We had him on the Medtronic Talks podcast a bit ago. And you also, or John in this article quoted, I'm assuming from the release, Gio DiNapoli, who's the president of the gastrointestinal business at Medtronic. And if I didn't mention at the top, he'll also be delivering a keynote address at DeviceTalks West. And cool. He's a very, really interesting guy, former basketball coach, professional basketball coach in Italy.
Oh, wow.
Before he came into medtech. So, and a basketball player too. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, cool guy. All right. What is number 2 on the Newmarker's Newsmakers?
Hey, number 2 on the list is we have Johnson & Johnson Vision launching some new products, including they had an expanded range now for their AccuView Ability overnight lenses, which they help treat myopia in children. That's more commonly called nearsightedness. But Johnson & Johnson visuals kind of talk about how it's actually really important to slow the progression of nearsightedness among children, because if you end up developing, severe nearsightedness late in life, that could cause some, serious eye conditions. So, these are like overnight lenses that, can temporarily reduce the refractive error, and, along with a professional myopia management plan, they say that these could, eliminate the need for, kids to wear contacts or glasses when they're awake, after the removal. So, I mean, that's kind of an exciting product. And, now they've got FDA approval for expanded range of lenses, so yeah, here we'll see. Hopefully we'll, we can see how this gets deployed, maybe there'll be some more promising things, like if, kids having eyesight problems.
They're kind of like eye retainers, I imagine, like correcting things at night while you sleep. Yeah. So parents would be like, oh, did you wear your Ability lens last night? Oh, right. Mom. It's like, got to wear that AccuView Ability lens every single night. And Johnson & Johnson had some additional news for older folks like me. You had their launch of their intraocular lens.
Yeah, exactly. They had the
presbyopia correcting intraocular lens.
Thank you. Yes. I'm luckily not old enough to worry, to know how to pronounce that.
Oh, you will, my friend. You'll get your progressive lenses soon enough.
I'm not too far behind you, Tom.
Soon enough.
Yes. I'm wearing my reading glasses right now.
Then you know all about presbyopia.
It's heading on the way. Yeah. So, intraocular lens. So they got that's powered by their IntelliLight technology. So it's this again, like they're saying, it's expands the presbyopia correction to more patients. So it's good news there. I mean, just getting more, these treatments getting expanded to a wider range of patients. And, it's, ophthalmology has actually been there's actually been a lot of interesting news in that space, a lot of innovations, getting a lot of attention on mass device. It's actually really showing itself to be a hot space right now. And we actually recently Sean posted a roundup of all the stuff we've been covering, like, ophthalmological device innovations that's on mass device. So if you want to, think you might have missed something, like check out that roundup, and find out more.
Excellent. All right, Chris Newmarker, what is the big number one on Newmarker's Newsmakers?
Number one on the list, we're talking on Friday morning, and just, hot off the presses. It's probably an old fashioned term now, but like fresh news right here. Like we had, Philips concluded what they called an extraordinary meeting of shareholders that approved Roy Jacobs to become, the Dutch medtech giant's, new CEO effective October 15th. But he's facing some challenges. I mean, their previous CEO, he's been there more than 11 years. And oversaw, Philips, carving out all of these businesses, divesting them, whatever, really be, getting out of, like moving away from lighting and audio and video, and like really focusing as a medtech business, buying Volcano. But, Philips has been, wrestling with this, deadly, CPAPs, recall. I mean, you got more than 1 million CPAPs, ventilators, and respiratory devices under recall right now. And, the company's supervisory board just said, after more than 11 years, it was time for a change. And Jacobs, who's, been with the company for more than a decade and, moved up, became head of the company's connected care business. I mean, he's really someone who seems to have a reputation in that company is someone who comes in and handles crises. I mean, he was their point person when the COVID pandemic started. They put him in charge of the Philips Respironics recall last year. They decided he's moving up to become CEO and get lead them through these challenges and hopefully to better things.
It's interesting the fact that he was in charge of the COVID efforts. It'd be interesting to see what sort of develops from folks who are put in charge of sort of that crisis management and where they kind of go, how much further up the ladder they go. If that sort of trial by fire really elevates some executives.
It definitely seems to for him. And I suspect he's probably really he has a lot of things he has to manage right now. But hey, we can hopefully when things are a little quieter over there, we really need to have him on here and hopefully can share like some good advice for other executives about managing through some challenges.
Absolutely. Maybe we'll get him in a future Device Talks meeting.
That'd be fantastic.
All right, next, we're going to have our interview with Adam Sachs, CEO and co-founder of Vicarious Surgical. A little bit of a note on this. I mentioned it up top. We actually recorded this during our DeviceTalks Tuesdays webinar. So it was a live interview. All interviews are live, but this one was done with audience members who asked questions. And you can still access the whole presentation if you go to devicetalks.com. Our DeviceTalks Tuesdays are all available on demand. So you can, if you'd rather watch this, because Adam did have a few slides, you could register and watch this instead of listening. But it's really up to you. I think it worked pretty well as a audio interview also. So before we begin this interview with Adam Sachs, I'd like to bring in the last word from our sponsor, Sertronics. I'm visiting with Tom Farron. Tom is Chief Revenue Officer at Sertronics. Tom, looking forward, what are some of the trends and developments that you're seeing that might impact product development and manufacturing in the medical device industry?
A couple of things kind of stand out in answer to that question. The first is we're seeing a lot more AI, companies that are developing software that helps throughout the industry, where results are put up to the cloud and other facilities or physicians can see that and learn from it. So these devices that have this AI embedded in them that are learning and teaching at the same time seems to really be taking off. And secondly, I'd say there's a real crossover between your standard medical device and robotics now. We've been building robotics, things that move and swim and fly now for about a decade. And it's really starting to bleed over into the medical device industry where devices will now have end effectors on them. So as a manufacturer, you've got to be able to have the supply chain locked in place, talk that language, understand how they all go together. You can't just build something that's static. We need to build something that literally actually moves. And the eyes of many systems are called perception boxes. We've been building those for, half of a decade or so. So we understand how those fit together, hardware and software. And as a company like ours, you've got to be comfortable. And again, you've got to speak the language and understand how those things are blending together. So big jumps in medical robotics. And as a robotics manufacturer, we are ideally positioned to blend the two.
All right. Well, thanks for those thoughts, Tom. And once again, if you'd like to find out more about Sertronics, go to its website, sertronics.com. That's CIRTRONICS.com. Thanks, Sertronics, for supporting the Device Talks weekly podcast. Thank you for being part of this. As I mentioned up top, I'm sorry, I can't see you, so I'm completely off my game. This was a sort of an idea that came to mind with something we've been wanting to do, and I tossed it over to you, and you were completely game. Didn't need any arm twisting at all. So I'm really grateful for you to take the time to do this.
You know what? I love doing new things, so let's try it out and see what happens.
Fantastic.
Thank you for thinking of me and having us. So yeah, a bit of background, by the way, about myself. I said I'd keep this to just a couple of minutes, so let's see if I can do that. I'm the founding CEO of Vicarious Surgical. I'm an engineer by background, so I went to MIT. It's very much the startup story that you've heard many times before. This company was started with my college roommate, Sami Khalifa, and a family friend, Dr. Barry Green. And we started working on this full-time about 8 years ago at this point. And really, the entire goal has been to tackle a long-standing set of problems that's existed in surgery. So I'll cover this at a pretty high level. There's more info on our website, and happy to dig in deeper in the Q&A as well, if anybody has any questions about the background or the history. But what this really comes down to is solving the challenges of open surgical procedures and enabling people to move past the large incisions that are still used in over 50% of surgical cases. So the way that most people get around open surgery is with multi-port minimally invasive surgery. You make multiple small incisions, triangulate from those incisions to one point inside of the abdomen, and you're able to operate. But the real challenge is that it pushes all the kinematic challenges and all of really the complications from the patient over to the surgeon. So the surgeon now has to create a robotic or a motion profile for every procedure based on where they put the incisions and where they want to operate inside of the patient. And if you imagine triangulating from those multiple incisions to a single point inside of the abdominal cavity, if you choose the incision points incorrectly, you're stuck with very limited operating capability. And multi-quadrant surgery often requires resetup, redocking, additional incisions, and an entirely different approach. So all of this creates a surprisingly significant learning curve for surgeons and entire care teams building out robotics programs with today's technologies, and ultimately present a significant barrier to adoption of minimally invasive technique overall. So we're not the only ones who have seen this challenge. I think the answer is it's relatively obvious. It's to go into a single incision so that you're no longer triangulating across the abdominal wall. You get past the abdominal wall. But all the existing single port technologies to date, they're all built on flexible robotic technology, which is just far too weak for most procedures. And in order to even generate the forces that they need to do most procedures, end up with 2.5 centimeter incisions. So when we started this company, we pretty quickly decided that, we needed to do rigid robotics. We needed to remove the coupled motion between each of the joints, because there's a form of coupled motion that essentially leads to force buildup from joint to joint with all the existing robotics technologies. We've invented and perfected a way to fully decouple all of that so that we can have these 9 degrees of freedom inside of the body. And the last thing that I'll touch on is what those joints actually make up, because I'm particularly proud of the insight of the 9 degrees of freedom. So if you think about existing surgical robots, they are essentially 6 degrees of freedom plus an end effector. It's actually true even beyond surgical robots. So it's XYZ plus yaw pitch roll gives you full position and orientation control. But the amazing thing, if you imagine, an existing surgical robot, I don't know if you can see my video, but it gives you full position and orientation control, but it doesn't give you control of how you get to that end effector location, which is why the incisions matter so much, because you end up with all these collisions. And part of what makes humans so dexterous is our extra redundant degrees of freedom. The fact that we can move our elbow up and down while keeping our hand in place, that we can reach around things. We've replicated all of this with superhuman flexibility so that the surgeon can not only go in and work straight forward, but we're designing our system so that the surgeon can work all the way back around the incision site. Truly, it's aimed to give the surgeon complete access to the entire abdomen through one small incision. The one other thing that I'll touch here is on some of the agreements that you were mentioning and the relationships we've built out with hospitals. I'm incredibly proud of some of the relationships that we built out with university hospitals as well as HCA Healthcare. These are 2 very large hospital chains with large adopters of surgical robots, and a total of over 200 combined hospitals. And these are really deep relationships across multiple levels, starting with product development. Today, we're working in order to make sure that our product meets these hospital system needs and the needs of hospitals, surgeons, patients, and payers across the world. Then go through verification and validation, clinical trials and evaluation, and of course, training when we're on marketing commercial. So I'll stop there and let everybody dig in.
I want to talk a bit about the technology, and you were explaining the 9 degrees of freedom that your system provides. What sort of engineering goes into designing that sort of instrument? What sort of disciplines did you have to bring into the creation of the Vicarious system, and why is it so different than other approaches?
Yeah, so I'll start with the fact that I'm incredibly biased in that I'm a mechanical engineer. I am very much a mechanical engineer. And I'm going to say that I think all robotics needs to start with mechanical engineering. So, if we look at, again, the coupled motion problem specifically, it's a problem where all the joints are linked together. So if you move one joint, all the distal joints also move. And other robotics companies have solved that in software, which it works, but it doesn't remove that exponential force buildup, which doesn't enable you to have all these joints inside of the body. So we really started from a mechanical engineering perspective, fix it in hardware, not fix it, the saying that everybody uses, like we'll fix it in software. And the answer is no, we're going to fix it in hardware. Then you layer in a ton of electrical engineering, the sensors throughout our arms, the cameras themselves bring in a tremendous amount of technology that's taken, frankly, electrical engineering feats from outside of our company, primarily from the cell phone industry, and brought those in through a tremendous amount of work on our side. And then, of course, software comes next. So the entire system runs software all the way from embedded software, literally run on microcontrollers in the robotic arms to compute the position, to crunch the video, all the way out through high-level software that runs on a computer and executes the full motion and kinematics of the entire robot together. So I'd say those are the core 3 disciplines, but wrapped around that, there's so much more. There's systems engineering, ensuring that the entire design works together. We have an integration engineering group that actually brings all of these pieces together. We have a data advanced sensing and artificial intelligence group that's working on a lot of the next generation stuff, leveraging these incredible sensors that we have. We have a clinical engineering group because we're not just building a robotic system that needs to be safe and deliver amazing results. It actually needs to fit within the clinical environment and work well with the care team. So it's every piece of this all needs to come together, and it's a pretty amazing feat.
That's great. And let's go. I'm going to actually go to a question we have from Duke already. So he says the arms of your device are impressive and complex with the joints and sensors. In your past presentations, they were to be disposable. If so, can you give insight into cost per case and complexity of manufacturing? Are your arms disposable or are they reusable? I mean, that kind of brings you to a whole other single-use versus reusable implant conversation. But will your arms be reusable or are they single-use?
So we are designing our system to be entirely single-use. I will say they are reusable and we reuse them internally. We're due to the decoupled nature of the actuators, we're able to use a lot lower cost components overall. So because we no longer have this exponential buildup of forces, we're moving from steel cables to polymer cables that are relatively low cost to a significant number of polymer components and 3D printed components throughout the arms. I will say this business model it's going to work with the current price points and even somewhat lower price points with robotic surgery per case today. But that being said, we're well aware that there's a lot of competition entering the market and there is some incentive to drive those price points down significantly. If they are driven down significantly, we may need to shift over to a reposable model. I'll say I'm, confident that that'll work because it's actually what we do internally today. We do not throw our arms away, after every internal procedure. We reuse them significantly just because it saves time and effort rather than having the expense of building new sets of arms every time. That's the consumable side. If I can also touch on the capital equipment side, I think that this is a pretty incredible opportunity for us as well, because our capital equipment is no longer 4 gigantic robotic arms. If you think about robotic arms of existing surgical robots that pivot about the trocar, they need to generate these huge, rapid, accurate swinging motions that pivot across the incision and then make tiny motions inside of the patient. We have none of that. The system outside is a support structure. We actually internally call it the robot support system. And it literally holds up the robot. Our CapEx cost of goods is about 5 to 10x lower than what exists on the market today.
So let's talk a bit about the size of the robot in terms of, and how do you go about competing for space in the surgical suite? Do you have to get smaller to get it into those rooms, or is the size less of an issue as it might appear to an outsider? But how big is your system, and how are you competing in? How do you hope to compete in getting some floor space in the surgical suite?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And the answer, like many things in medical devices and surgical robotics, is multifaceted. So I think it's actually not, space is an important aspect, as is of course total cost and the budget that you're taking up, or I should really say total value that you're delivering, total training time. All of these pieces go together in terms of actually competing within the OR setting. And if you look at a device, I think it really comes down to how often it's used. There are lots of devices in an operating room, which both make space relatively scarce and relatively cramped. But at the same time, I think is good evidence that hospitals and surgeons will buy and use devices that provide significant value to them. So if you look at, existing surgical robots or simply look at our first indication of ventral hernia, there are a good number of hospitals and a good number of operating rooms that do enough ventral hernia cases to justify the purchase and use of a robot. But that number is still relatively small. And there's a reason that we're coming out with indication after indication and tool after tool, all within about a year of our initial launch, because it is going to be incredibly important as we tackle that at competing for space, for mindshare, for training, for everything and all of the resources, in the hospital setting, and then aim to really take that and deliver it back in terms of value to the patients and hospitals and surgeons. We're going to need to have a more holistic offering longer term. So that really is sort of our short-term approach, is focus on hospitals and OR settings that can use our device heavily within hernia repair in the beginning and then quickly expand outside of that.
What does that pace look like? If you think you'll have hernia 1 year and then another indication the next, or is it longer than that? Or how would you like to see that unfold?
We're targeting significantly shorter than that.
Okay.
We're targeting a cadence of a number of additional indications within the first year.
Excellent. And I want to talk a bit about your Centers of Excellence news in a minute, but we do have a question from someone in the audience. Han asks, what does the UI look like to control the position, orientation, approach, direction? Is there some kind of haptic control going up the arm of the surgeon?
All right, so two interesting and relatively distinct questions. So I'm going to split those a little bit and talk about the haptics first. So the haptics is a really interesting question. And I think that the real question with haptics is what is the value of haptics? Nobody has ever really done haptics in soft tissue surgical robot to date. And I think that there's a handful of reasons for that. Well, first, that the sensing is actually very hard. Generating the forces to the surgeon is pretty easy. There's actually some off-the-shelf tools that can do that. But measuring 6 degrees of freedom of force is really hard. And that's a problem that we have solved with the sensing in our arms. And I'm incredibly proud of. Now, the question is, though, what is the value that haptics delivers to the surgeon? Because if they can feel everything that they do, what I'll tell you from our own internal testing is that it is the coolest thing in the world. I mean, it feels incredible. But at the same time, you've actually lost a decent amount of the value that you're delivering, and that the surgeon now needs to go back to exerting forces, to using physical energy. The procedures become tiring again. So really, what surgeons want from at least all of our everconversations and observations is what they want is to avoid injuring the patient, to put the right amount of tension on the suture, to do everything, to avoid breaking sutures by accident, actually a really big issue in robotic cases today. And we can deliver all of that without actually having the surgeon feel everything that they're doing. And that's something that I'm really excited about. Requires the sensing, requires the force measurement, but then letting surgeons set limits and letting them set controls and warning them, or maybe even letting them feel when they're going above a certain force limit that they can set. And all of that delivers the value of haptics without the downsides that I just mentioned. Mm-hmm. So what the UI looks like and how they move around, I don't want to go too far into this for two reasons. One, honestly, it's just really hard to explain. But two is that I'm not positive how much is covered with existing IP. And I just don't want to accidentally cross that line. But what I'll say at a high level is that it feels like you pull yourself around the abdomen. Mm-hmm. Essentially, it's as if you can kind of grab on and pull yourself towards something, grab up and rotate yourself back, all while you're sitting comfortably facing straight forward. There is actually a lot beyond that that's incredibly cool that I can't wait to show off, and I will be showing off in a demo of our technology around the end of this year.
And I remember from an earlier conversation, was there a VR component as well? And is that going to be included in your first generation, or is that coming further down the line?
The VR will be coming a little bit further down the line. It's something that we're really excited about. It's the coolest thing in the world. And during all of our beta 1 testing, one of the things that we really quickly learned with the user interface is that it's just, frankly, VR headsets are not quite there. It offers additional risks, and it's not worth it at our immediate initial launch. So our system is VR capable. The experience, it actually was the main way of operating with our system for a very long time. And it really does make you feel like you're inside of the body. But we can provide so much value and so much capability that surgeons don't have today, mm-hmm. all with primarily with the business end of our robot. And we don't have any additional risk of holding up the launch of our system in order to put VR in. So it'll be an add-on after additional launch.
Right. And Miranda asked, does the main trocar include an accessory port to pass suture mesh?
All right. So also,
and if we're getting too granular, just say so.
No. I as long as you don't mind my tangents. So
I don't think they do.
So I'll start by answering the question. The question is actually, it's if you look at the videos online of how our system is inserted. So those decoupled rotational actuators allow us to no longer generate rotational motion by pivoting through the trocar, which is the way pretty much everybody else generates rotational motion. We have actual rotational actuators inside of the patient. And what that's designed to enable us to do is to put an arm in, move it out of the way, put an arm in, move it out of the way. And that leaves most of the trocar patent for you to pass things through. So you start out by having a very large trocar if you want to use a particularly large mesh that you could pass things through without, you could remove an arm and pass something huge into, or you have up to about 8 millimeters in our trocar, even when the device is fully inserted. So you can actually put most meshes through that. Now, I'll say that the tangent here, though, is the real question is why single port? Because there's been a huge push of notes and natural orifice surgery and single port surgery because of this idea that it's better for the patient. And I think it is better for the patient. That's why we all do what we do. But it's better for the patient because it provides better operating capability for the surgeon, or at least it can in theory. It never has to date. And that's why we're doing single port, because it enables us to get past the abdominal wall, and it enables us to design our device in a way that provides the surgeon this incredible capability. So that is all to say that while the surgeon can put the mesh in through the primary trocar, they can also just put another trocar in and do that as well. And I don't have any significant objection to that either way. It's between the surgeon and the patient.
Let's talk a bit about your Center of Excellence agreements. You referenced that in the presentation at the start. But I remember reading the release, and it just came out recently, and thinking that, oh, geez, I didn't know that a company your stage without a product on market would have this sort of relationship. Talk first about the relationships, what they are, what they provide for you in the hospitals. But then I'd love to understand how these came together.
Yeah, so it started with actually some outreach from hospitals to us, and which is something that I'm really proud of. And these are top level engagements at major U.S. hospital chains, including the largest in the U.S. And I mean, you're absolutely right. It's something that just hasn't existed to date. And I'm most proud of because it really means that these hospital chains are devoting a huge amount of time and energy into helping us deliver on our mission in order to provide them a product that lets them, frankly, deliver on their mission to provide good care to their patients. I'll say as a slight aside here, I've been incredibly inspired by both of these hospital chains and how much everything they do ties back to helping their surgeons and entire care teams deliver better care to their patients. And at the end of the day, that's what this is all about for us. So it's about going through, we've created working groups across every discipline that we can think of here to make sure that everything in the clinical operations, the supply chain management, the care team management, every piece of this is set up in a way that will allow for the most streamlined and rapid adoption of our technology in their systems and systems across the world. Then taking it through verification and validation, clinical evaluation in clinical trial setting, and then on-market training as well. And it's our explicit goal to deliver these hospitals and through these agreements to deliver hospitals across the world exactly what they're asking for and exactly what they need so that they can rapidly adopt it and set that up way in advance. And the last thing that I will say is it also, in the case of one of these, included a significant financial investment from the hospital.
What do the exchanges look like between your engineers and the hospitals? Are they sending people to Waltham, Massachusetts? Are you sending people to hospitals to kind of learn from each other? What is the exchange like between the two?
Yeah. Actually, and if I can just correct, the investment
Sure.
actually came first and then the agreements, which I'm incredibly proud of there.
Okay.
But the answer is both. The answer is absolutely both. We go to, their facilities, observe cases, talk to their care team members, have working groups both at their site and at sites and ours as well, and have their teams, come out, try our technology, do cadaver procedures, give us the feedback that we need. And their surgeons make up, a decent portion of our surgeon luminary group as well. That's really core to providing the feedback that we need going from, initial technology to beta 1 to beta 2, and to the clinical trial units.
So and folks, we're going to be wrapping up in probably a few minutes. So I'll ask a couple more questions that I have. But if you have any quick ones you want to get in there, please do pass them along. We talked a bit about the FDA. Where are you in that timeline? I think when we talked last year, you were in year 7 of a 9-year journey to get a device to market. I don't know, are we in year 8 now, or is it still a 9-year journey? Is it a 10-year journey? One never really knows when dealing with regulatory bodies.
Yeah, I think the big, thing that's come up in between that the last time that we talked, at least from my memory, and now is needing to do clinical trials.
Yeah.
So, the FDA, and I actually, even Gary, I think, was talking about this on their last earnings call, is that across the industry, the FDA is adding significant requirements, including requirements for clinical data. I think there are pluses and minuses to all of this, but at the end of the day, what it means is that we'll end up doing a relatively small clinical trial going through. So the answer to the question about timeline is around the end of next year, we'll be filing for an IDE in order to do our clinical trial. We'll conduct the trial. I'd say the trial itself is probably a 4-month clinical trial, but I think most people on this podcast are well aware that to do a 4-month clinical trial is wrap a total of 9 to 12 months around it, and you're probably at the complete timeline there. So ID toward the end of next year, and then de novo filing the year following.
Someone's asking if you have any eye toward the EU.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd say we haven't shared publicly exactly what outside the U.S. markets we'll be targeting. There are a number of really interesting OUS markets for surgical robotics. The EU is higher up on the list under MDD than it is under MDR, is kind of the biggest piece that I'll say. So yes, long term, of course, we don't want to restrict our technology to just the US, but it's not a coincidence that we've significantly partnered with folks in Asia in the past. I think a lot of the combination of ability to charge for medical devices compared to the additional regulatory burdens beyond FDA clearance make a lot more sense for a company of our stage than EU under MDR.
Someone's asking if you think the development to market timeline for robotic tech will shorten in the foreseeable future, given that technology such as digital twins mature. So I guess as we're able to, virtually test things through digital means, the hurdle's getting a little lower for future companies or for you in the future.
I think that the answer is maybe somewhat, but not a huge amount. It hasn't really been what we've seen in the past. It's say an 8 to 10 year journey for most companies that we've seen, including ourselves. And it's a good question. Like, how does technology end up coming in and then not accelerate the time to market? But if you look at the total complexity of the system, there's so many pieces that go together that, our ability to bring in and leverage additional existing technologies, what it certainly has done is lower the total cost to bring a device like ours to market. But the number of builds and iterations, I think, has remained relatively constant.
Fantastic. And my final question for you, and if anyone hops on with another question, I'll see if I can get it in. But you're a public company now. You went public via a SPAC. How has that been for you? I mean, you're running a very company that's really advancing technology, that's bringing an innovative system online, and you're doing it in the glaring eyes of the public markets. What has that process been like? Sure, it brings you capital, which you obviously need, but it brings a lot of complexity as well.
Yeah, I'd say it's been almost all excellent. Obviously, the public markets are a little bit crazy recently, but at the end of the day, it's brought the capital we need, but also brought, frankly, an ability to have conversations like this, which, as a growing company that's hiring like crazy, bringing on people and partnerships across the industry. I'm not sure these partnerships with HCA and UH would have happened if we weren't a public company and didn't have the level of transparency to the world that comes with being a public company. Our ability to grow and frankly, the capital and the fuel that funds all of that also comes out of being a public company. So, I'll say it's not without its downsides and not without its distractions, but most of it is extremely positive.
Excellent. And the final question, someone just asked if you're related to MIT prof. Emmanuel Sachs.
Yeah, the answer is yes. Ellie Sachs is my dad.
Excellent. All right. That wraps up our conversation. I know you need to go. I think this has been a lot of fun. I hope it's something we can build on and have you back when you have more news to report. Thanks for taking the time, Adam. I really appreciate it.
Thank you again. Really excited to do this.
All right, Chris Newmarker. Now is the time where we plead for social media followers.
You've got to like, follow, subscribe.
That's right. Well, actually, let's talk about ourselves first. Where can folks find you on social media, Chris?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Chris Newmarker. I'm just 100 below 5,000 connections. So if everybody listening to this podcast could just connect with me right now, I can, help me get over 5,000.
That's great. Wow. You're closing in. I gotta step up my game.
Closing in.
All right. And you're on Twitter at Newmarker. I'm on Twitter at MedTechTom. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. And if you connect with Chris, make sure you connect with me so he stays the same distance behind me in terms of followers on LinkedIn. Because
don't let Tom
I'm
fall
small
behind.
and competitive that way.
Too.
Yes.
Come on.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely.
Yes. Don't want to. Or if you want to leave Tom in the dust, sorry, Tom.
I thought we were pals, Chris. How dare you? How dare you? Anyway, what can folks do with this fancy podcast of ours?
Like, follow, subscribe.
That is right. Like, follow, and or subscribe. And this podcast, future episodes of this podcast, rather will be sent directly to you in addition to Intuitive Talks and Stryker Talks. And you can also like, follow, and or subscribe to Medtronic Talks. And episodes of that podcast series will be sent directly to your listening device. It just makes so much sense. So there's really no question. There's no reason not to do it. Just save yourself some effort.
Let the medtech knowledge flow into your ears.
Exactly. You will just get smarter through osmosis. Your phone will be just sending waves of medtech information your way. So, all right.
Hopefully not. Hopefully you don't catch our goofiness. Just the knowledge. The knowledge.
No.
Our coolness.
Goofiness.
Are they going to become cool like us?
That is hard to pull off. Being cool like Tom and Chris.
Exactly,
we have not figured it out yet. But you can try to be cool like us and be at Device Talks West, which is happening on October 19th and 20th. That is at the Santa Clara Convention Center. We'll have great representation from Boston Scientific, Abbott, Medtronic, as we've mentioned, Johnson & Johnson, Outset. There's more and more and more, Penumbra, Shockwave. So we'll go to devicetalks.com, find the agenda, check it out, and please do register. And make sure you use the code DTWeekly25. That'll save you 25%.
There you go.
But if you do reach out to Chris and I, just say, hey, I heard something about a code, and maybe we'll hook you up.
Yeah, we take care of our friends.
Exactly. All right, folks. Well, thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Device Talks Weekly podcast. Tune in, next week, and we'll have another great episode of this podcast sent directly to you.
Hey, enjoy the fall, enjoy the football.